Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, what's included in the county's $6.3 billion budget? When the county council proposes transit options, is that code for buses to nowhere? What effect does the delayed primary have on the upcoming elections? And is the gas tax holiday in Maryland just better than Christmas? Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former county council member Mike Knapp and the president of the Montgomery County Federation of Republican Women, Laruie Halverson. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. With great fanfare, the county executive announced a proposed budget for Montgomery County at a whopping $6.3 billion, $300 million more than last year's budget. The county executive said he wanted to focus on affordable housing, climate change, and increasing police salaries, among other areas. Mike, a great deal of the increase in this budget is targeted towards social programs, which Mr. Elrich, claims were harmed by the COVID pandemic. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think they have, although interestingly, I think the county ended up having to use a number of social service organizations to help distribute resources during the pandemic. And so I know a number of social service organizations in the county have actually gotten stronger as a result of COVID because they served in a capacity to help distribute funds. So, I mean, I think if we look at mental health, that's still an issue. We talked about that on our last show. That's something, whether that's in schools or more globally, something needs to be addressed. But I think that it is an election year, and it looked to me that there was the distribution of candy. That there's a whole lot of folks got a whole lot of not a lot of money, but enough to feel better about where they were. The challenge I saw was when you get this kind of additional money, it's a chance for us to really begin to think how we're structurally addressing our budget. And we talk about things like the energy tax, which we know makes the county less competitive relative to our neighbors, and it's $200 million each year in the budget. And so if we actually have more money, this would have been a really good year to think about how do we start to defray how much is going that energy tax to build a more sustainable, more competitive base going forward. And there wasn't a whole lot of conversation about that more strategic approach. There was more focus on how do we get a lot of resources into the hands of a lot of people.
Well, that's an interesting segue because Laruie, former council member Howie Dennis used to say that Montgomery County residents hate paying taxes, but they love the services that the county provides. One of those services is, designed towards environmental programs. 18.6 million in new funds are being devoted to the county's green bank. Is this money well spent, or as Mike suggests, should we look at other alternatives to the energy taxes?
Yeah, it reminds me when I went to visit the Ford plant in Detroit, and they spent more time talking about the green initiatives that they were doing and their green roofs, that they weren't talking about their actual business. And I feel like that's what's happening with the county. They're talking so much about green initiatives. Now, maybe the green bank will be helpful to help businesses find loans and things to be able to have some more green initiatives. And if that helps them, fine. But if it hurts the businesses, that's not a good thing. We want to make sure we enhance what we can to help businesses grow and thrive in Montgomery County. More money should have been spent on that part of the budget instead of all these green initiatives.
So, we beat the drum on this program a lot about, economic development and competitiveness with our neighboring jurisdictions, particularly across the river in Virginia. Is there anything in this budget that really helps economic development, Mike?
I mean, arguably, and you're going to talk about this in a minute as we look at kind of some initiatives for something like Montgomery College. I think there's some workforce elements that are there, but I think when we look at why we aren't as competitive relative to our neighbors, a lot of it is the structural stuff. It's things that make it harder to live, more costly to be here. And I don't think we addressed any of those issues. I think economic development, the organization got some more resources they were looking for, and hopefully that will help them market better and do some things. But those underlying challenges that why someone would pick Fairfax versus here, I don't think we use this budget to address, unfortunately.
Well, and when you look at the schools too, I looked at the FY 2011 budget, 49.3% of the budget back then went towards the public schools. This year for the 2023 budget, 46.4% is going towards public schools. So it shows you the priority is moving away from public schools, and that's not going to bring more people to our county either. So that's a real big concern.
Well, but Laruie, isn't $3 billion enough for the county schools?
It seems like it would be, but when you look at how the pie is cut, the pie is getting smaller. That's what I'm saying. And maybe there's a good reason for it, but we are losing enrollment this year. So that could be another reason why they're only fulfilling 99% of the requested budget for public schools.
Well, I think, I don't want to get sidetracked on just the school issue. We can devote a whole topic to that by itself. Mike, I want to follow up with you. There is money in this budget to increase a Eastern Educational Center for Montgomery College, $3.3 million. Talk about that very briefly.
So one of the things that we've recognized for a while is that eastern part of the county is generally underserved with a variety of services. And so the county has been trying to figure out how to kind of reinvigorate that with developments like White Oak and other places. But one of the things we need to recognize is east-west migration patterns in Montgomery County are a real challenge. And so the population there doesn't have access to higher education in much of the way the rest of the county does. And so what the college is doing is now initially putting together a service center that will allow us to provide courses to East County residents that sort of make that accessible, and then look to see, does it make sense for us to expand and have a fourth campus in the East County that again will serve as a hub for economic development and make access to the population there for more courses and more certificate programs to help grow that economy and help those folks advance themselves.
So, Montgomery College is the hidden, one of the best hidden gems of our county. And I think it's great that we're recognizing that there's a need on the eastern side. Laruie, the county has been hit also by a number of early retirements from the police force and an apparent difficulty in attracting new officers. The last recruiting class held back in January, I think only had 18 even members in the class. So is the effort to increase salaries going to be enough to reverse the trend?
Well, they are proposing quite an increase in salaries to try to make them more on par with the rest of the state and around us. So I think that may help a little bit, but there still has to be much done in improving morale with the police force. And when they're cutting the SRO program, but they're trying to put in a CEO program where it's not as effective as before in our schools, it's just showing that they're cutting things and they're not doing things that are really what's best for the safety of our children and for the rest of our citizens here. So I'm really concerned about all that.
Well, in addition to some of the initiatives that the council has taken, there are also state initiatives that have targeted the way our policing is conducted, and there's a major crime bill, I guess, pending in the state. We'll have to take a look and see what impact we have from that. We need to go on to our next topic, which is this week, the county council expressed support for a plan to increase rapid bus transit lines along I-270 corridor, as opposed to either an extension of the Metro Red Line or adding additional lanes to I-270 for cars. Mike, I want to go to you. I mean, if we learned nothing from COVID, it should be this. People appeared to like to commute in their own cars. They didn't want to be in mass transit. So why does the council keep pushing plans that consumers do not want? Now, you mentioned east-west traffic patterns in the county. Is this the idea of just going north-south to Frederick doesn't seem to be the solution?
No, it doesn't. I mean, part of the challenge continues to be, if you're going to do transit, and I agree with you, I think we've recognized that, especially coming out of a pandemic, people are going to put their own personal safety and aren't going to go into places where there are lots of folks kind of clustered together. And that may take a while for us to get back to that. But if you're ultimately going to do transit, you have to do something that's a very fixed pathway, right? We know that if you're going to see economic development, you're going to have people use things. It's got to be in places that they are, and it can't be movable. And we keep trying to talk about bus rapid transit, and we just don't have good examples of how that's working in the county and working well. And candidly, we've yet to actually come up with a way to make that pay for itself. Our fare box recovery on our regular transportation, our regular transit has always lagged because we don't have enough density on the routes where people are traveling from. And so now how do you make that work for bus rapid transit? And it's not just putting a bus line down, it's actually coming up with a way to make sure that the development is supporting that as well, so the people are in those places. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of moving parts there, but just to say we're going to do transit and that's going to solve our traffic problem is just one little part of the conversation. You've got to be looking at all the other pieces.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things I recall is that back in the days when we were live in studio, one of our guests had to take our wonderful bus service, and as nice as it is, you know, from his home in Rockville over to our studios was very difficult. It took him over an hour just to make a very short commute because he, you know, didn't have a car for a while. So we've got to find a way to move people around that's going to make it more convenient and attractive for people. And so, Laruie, you know, how do we get the idea that we need more roadways and more development of roadways in the county, into the county council?
Well, the people that really want that are too busy on the road and too busy going to work to really go out and complain about it. So all the other activists who are out in home, or the retired people, they're all going out and they're the squeaky wheel that everyone's listening to. So that's a big problem, because I really do believe that most people do want better roads in our county, and this whole, you know, looking at Virginia versus Maryland, we're falling behind. So we really need to fix that, and technology is going to keep improving things so that you know, there'll be driverless cars that will pick us up and take us somewhere, and more electric options or whatever. I just feel like we should be more focused about commuting to work using mass transit more, and not you know, all the other things we like to do, shopping and all that should all be by car. You know, like people with children, they can't get around. The carpenter who has to get to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, that buses aren't going to be available to them. and the idea of taking an Uber or a driverless car somewhere, just those aren't realistic for the vast majority of our citizens in Montgomery County. I think we hate cars. The council hates cars. Let's just be clear about it. They do, and I bet you how many of them actually use mass transit themselves.
Yeah. Well, and the reality is, it's got to be a yes and, right? It's not this or that. I think most rational people go, yes, it wouldn't be bad to have better access to transit, but that's not going to solve the problem. That's going to be a piece of it. And so how do you do roads and transit and be able to have that conversation? And again, we've talked about this before. We always kind of want to make this a binary, right? It's this or that, and it can't be that. It's got to be this and. We've got to be focusing on both if we're going to really address transportation.
Oh, Mike, you should be running for county executive. I think. When we come back from this short break, the
filing deadline, I guess I could.
Part of the unwashed masses that are running for county executive. So Mike, so when we come back from this short break, what effect does the delayed primaries have on the upcoming election? Well, we just heard one positive one, and the gas tax holiday. Is that better than Christmas? Stay tuned. And welcome back. As a result of lawsuits challenging the state's congressional redistricting plan that are now before the Maryland Court of Appeals, the date for the primary has been pushed back to July 19th. So Mike, how does this affect those upcoming elections?
Well, I think there's been a bit of a freezing effect, because I think you've had a lot of those folks who've been trying to run, assuming they were kind of they know who their opponents are, and they know what the deadline was, we're working towards kind of ramping up their campaigns. Now, you know, there's still opportunity for other people to get in the race. So do they? And so at what point does the race really begin? And so I think there's been kind of a chilling effect. And I think the other piece that you're going to see is, now when you're kind of in the throes of what should be the big campaign, you're going to have a week for Memorial Day, We know that people kind of start of the summer season, go to the beach, and a lot of people in this area head out, and then you have 4th of July. And then you're also going to have the fact that a lot of people are going to be on vacation when you get to July 19th. And so I'm going to be really curious to see, as you get through this chilling effect, then when do people engage? And when people do start to engage and actually really run hard, is anybody paying attention?
Well, it'll be interesting because, so much of, particularly in the Democratic primary, there's a great number of candidates running for county executive, and it'll be a get out the vote effort. Of course, with early voting and with mail-in balloting, it may not be as difficult as we're anticipating. So, Laruie, in addition to the delay in the filing deadline, will this help Republicans? And what are the other collateral effects that the delay in the primary is going to have this year?
Well, first, I want to say thank you to all the Democrat legislators in Maryland who have made this happen, because it was their map they passed that is very gerrymandered that's putting us in this situation. So we have to wait longer, and a lot of people will be on vacation. So I think that I know there are a lot of Republicans that are still contemplating whether they're going to run or not. And I know someone who's going to be graduating, getting a graduate degree in May. So she's still working on that and wants to start on it heavy right after she graduates. There's a number of, we have some really great candidates that are coming up, and I'm really excited about what we'll have, but we don't have enough still. So it does give the Republicans more time, but then they don't have that much time to campaign. So that's the short end of the stick there. But I hope that it will help Republicans overall.
Well, I think, it's a challenging time. When I had my one, effort for running for county council, I could have used, an extra 2 months to run. I probably wouldn't have done any good because Howie Dennis would have still beaten me. But
Howie pretty much beat everybody. So that's
yeah,
okay.
he did. So in any event, it'll be interesting to see the effect that this delay in the primaries have. We got to go on to our gas tax issue, because I think everybody, when they hear about the gas tax holiday, is has a smile on their face from ear to ear. But last Friday, I wasn't happy because 2 days before before the anticipated effective date or the gas tanks, I had to fill up. Otherwise, I had 10 miles on my little odometer thing, said otherwise I was going to run out of gas. So I had to pay that extra 36 cents a gallon no thanks to Larry Hogan sitting up there waiting for that bill to come. So, Laruie, did the state do the right thing by suspending the gas tax?
I think it's a nice relief for some people. It makes you feel better. I don't know if it really saves you a whole lot of money. If you're in business and drive a lot, of course it does, but it saves you about $5.85 for an average tank right now. And it's just nice, but it's also being used, I think, as a tactic for, Peter Franchot, because he's making it sound like that was all his idea, but, and then there's Governor Hogan, it's his idea, but you know what, Dan Cox, he had that idea and it went through and there was a reading for it. It was House Bill 577. And he's not getting a lot of publicity about that, but he originally, I think in January, brought up this idea of cutting the gas tax by a certain amount for 6 months. So that was, I think that was quite expensive, but I do think it's good. It's good overall. And I think that it'll help business overall too.
I think it's great. Mike,
how do you really feel, Casey?
Well, look, at 36, as Laruie said, $5.50 per average fill up may not seem like a lot, but that's a lunch for somebody.
Sure.
Yeah, let's make it permanent. I'd like to see this a permanent thing.
I mean, that's real money. And
no, it is.
So I don't think we should be, be dismissive of the fact that this is a great thing for the residents of Montgomery County.
No, I think it is. I think it's and to be fair, there aren't a whole lot of bipartisan initiatives that we see in the state. And I think this is one that certainly a lot of people are going to claim credit for it, as Laruie indicated. But the nice thing is, I think a lot of them can. And so, when in a year where there's a surplus, to be able to use that and be able to say, look, we recognize the challenges people are facing for a variety of things that are out of our control. It's nice. The one thing that I've seen a number of reports on, and I think this is one of the challenges as to how long do you extend this. So the nice thing is we have a surplus, but those gas taxes are actually going to paying for transportation projects. And so at some point, does that eat into our ability to actually fund transportation? Because we have the surplus, I think if they're smart, we should be able to offset that and keep the transportation projects on track. But it just becomes something to say, at some point, those curves cross and we end up in an interesting situation.
Well, former panelist Rich Parsons, if he were on today, would be railing against the gas tax moratorium because he wanted the gas tax raised because he wanted more roads being built. So I know Rich is watching. Rich, we love you, but we're happy that the gas tax is being suspended for a little while. When we come back from this short break, stay tuned for Parting Shots. And welcome back. Before we go to Parting Shots, I just want to point out the fact that I'm wearing my Maryland tie today. Today is that we're taping on is Friday, March 25th, and it is Maryland Day. And Maryland was founded in 1634. Can you believe it? 388 years ago. That's unbelievable. The state of Maryland should be proud of its long history and its long period of prosperity. So for everybody out there, happy Maryland Day today. Now with their own parting shots, Laruie Halverson.
Yes, I'd also like to mention that this is the 50th anniversary, this year is the 50th anniversary of the Maryland Women's Legislative Caucus. But you know what? It may be the death of the Legislative Caucus this year because of what happened last week. There was an agreement that every third year there would be a Republican elected as the president of that women's organization that's supposed to be bipartisan, representing women, all women in Maryland. However, the Lauren Aiken, who's a delegate, she was the president-elect, and she did not get elected, and instead they elected Montgomery County's Leslie Lopez, who is a Democrat. And as a result, the women, the 11 women in the Republican side walked out and resigned. So that's unfortunate what happened. And but I'm glad, I support what they did. So wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Laruie. Mike Knapp, your parting shot.
So my parting shot is as we're in the height of cherry blossom season, and we can actually go again. We're kind of reminded of and how exciting it is as we continue to emerge from the pandemic. It's just really interesting to me to see how, as people are starting to come together, how they're engaging. So whether it's getting excited about graduations and actually seeing people, or being able to just congregate in open spaces together, even if we're still a little socially distanced and some people still have masks on, just the ability to take advantage of things like the Cherry Blossoms and Cherry Blossom Festival to actually come back together again as a community and as a regional community, I think is really exciting to see, and it's fun.
It absolutely is. And since in my family, my sister was a cherry blossom princess, my wife was a cherry blossom princess, and my daughter was a cherry blossom princess.
Wow.
In the past. And it's a wonderful organization. The Conference of States puts this on, and it's an educational experience for the young women who participate, because one of them has an opportunity to go to Japan on a trip, and it's a wonderful deal, and the parade is always fun. I want to thank the panelists for being here each and every today, but I also want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.